What's up, family? Welcome back to the channel. I hope you all are having a wonderfully productive and progressive week. I'm back with another video today, and I think this one will be a fairly good one. I am going to try to keep this one short because I am feeling a little bit under the weather. Well, let's be honest, a lot under the weather. Under the weather. See there. I typically take off the first Mondays of every month as far as I take a break from content creation because the first weekends are so busy, right? We have Sunday sessions, we have our community development series, sometimes we have our game night, and we have Bible study with the next pastor. So many times that's just a lot to come back from. And so I try to take those Mondays to rest and recuperate, which is not always what happens, of course, because we have a lot of things that we're planning. And so I am a little under the weather today. So this one will not, or at least I'm gonna try for it not to be a long one. We all know how that goes. But if you haven't already, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that alert notification bell, and consider joining, supporting, or connecting with this channel, community, or content in any way that makes sense for you. Share this video with somebody who you think this will give them something else to think about and another way to grow and to learn. And then last but not least, check out our merch. We have some really dope merch and we have some really incredible books. Buying our merch is one of the easiest ways to support the mission of building community beyond superstition while giving yourself something to support and spreading our values at the same time. And right now, all of my books on Amazon are absolutely free, starting yesterday, going to Friday. All of my books are absolutely free. Black Nonbeliever Next Door, Christ Held Up, Insignificant, Memphis the Last Supper, and Parenting on Purpose are all free in Kindle version, Kindle format for the rest of this week. So if you've been curious about getting some of my books before, but maybe finances are a struggle for you, or maybe you just didn't feel like spending money on your boy, either way, we've had such an incredible last year. I wanted to do something to celebrate, and I thought that this was a way to give back to the people who have made this channel and the community what it is. So there you have that. And also, we're coming to Raleigh. Building community locally is very important to us. And so that's why this year, like, we're taking the swan dive approach, if I can take a phraseology from Kyle, and we're just trying to see what we can make happen. So as of April, we'll be in Raleigh, North Carolina, with an event to see if we can build some local community there. We'll be doing the same thing in Detroit, the same thing in Chicago, the same thing in Portland, San Francisco, LA. And then we've got some requests from Georgia, from Texas, and New Mexico. So y'all be on the lookout for us. We do have the link in the description for the BridgeCity Weekends Raleigh event. And the website is now mobile ready, so you can actually take a look at it from your phone. And then for those of you who want to support the event financially, because we need your support, we're committed to making this event free. And in order to do that, we have to find a way to fund it. And so if you could make a small or large donation, check out that link and give us your thoughts. All right. So let's jump into this conversation. That may have been the shortest introduction that I've done. I tell you, it didn't feel short. And so we're going to see how fast I can get through this. So what I want to talk about, I did a video last week, I think it was last week, on the way that church has co-opted the idea of community, right? And this was not new study for me. These are things that come from my days as a pastor, and I think I kind of explained that in the video. That I was definitely, y'all know, I was charismatic. So I leaned into things like the fivefold ministry, the apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers. For the early part of my ministry, I've been considered both an apostle and a prophet. And then I think by the time I was 21, I had decided that I didn't want to use those titles. And just to kind of give you a little bit of type of believer that I was at the time, I realized that certain people were automatically turned off. Excuse me. Certain people were automatically turned off at the idea of these titles, so there was certain churches that I'd be invited to participate in if I insisted that my name be Apostle D.L. Martin, which is what I was going by from like 17 to 20. But if I insisted that's my name, or that's my title, there are several churches who don't believe in the apostolic. There are other churches who don't believe that anybody that young could be an apostle. I mean, which is a good. So I realized, like, it was a barrier, an unnecessary one, you know? So like I didn't get any special points for having the title. It was just an ego thing for most other people. And people really did get like upset with me. I lost friendships in ministry because I said no. I may still feel like I'm an apostolic gift to the body of Christ or whatever, but because my desire, and this has kind of always been my approach to things, because my desire is to reach people, and I did very much kind of take a Pauline approach to things, which I become all things to all men that I may save some. You know, that was my approach. But I did notice that there was a lot of confusion and a lot of misinformation about what these titles meant in Christian theology and among many churches, because most people were pulling their understanding of these different titles from the Bible alone. And the problem is, the Bible doesn't go into any detail of defining what any of these things are, nor does it go into the detail of supporting or promoting the origin of these terminologies or these roles. And so in that last video, I went through many of the things that appear in in the Christian Bible in the New Testament that are absolutely secular. You know, the whole idea of apostles and evangelists for sure, and even teachers, these are all things that come from secular society, which is one of the things that I do try to remind the secular communities, because you know we have people who say, well, what y'all do looks too much like church. And it's just like, I hate to do this to you. Well, I don't, because I do love to check people and get them, like, to get them out of your childish reactions, you know, because people have said that about our stuff. So they say our stuff looks like church. Now, mind you, we cuss, we don't talk about religion. We don't talk about doctrine. We don't talk about dogma. We don't talk about deities. We talk about personal growth. We talk about community development. We sing together to help each other feel better. And for whatever reason, certain people in the secular community, they look at that and they say, oh, that looks like a church, instead of saying, oh, that looks like group therapy, or saying, oh, that looks like community. And it really shows you the number one reason that the secular community is not doing community, because they're so afraid of looking like church that they won't even do what's best for the people they're in relationship with. And again, community is just not some cute buzzword to use. Whatever struggles you are dealing with right now, you are dealing with those struggles because you don't have a community. 9 times out of 10. You know what I'm saying? This is why I have very little respect for the individualists who just sit on the sidelines and just yell that the sky is falling, while absolutely refusing to partner up with other people to help create some type of shelter for when the sky actually does fall. You know what I'm saying? It's like so many people in the secular community just wants to be the announcer of bad things. You just want to be the proclaimer of doom. Doom is coming, and I told you all so. See, ha, ha, ha. You're a fucking child. I mean, like, you're worse than a child if that's the way, like, I don't even want to say worse, but you're less than a child if that's the way that you approach life. You're not helping, you know, and you're incredibly misinformed. The coalition, the coalescence of church activity is not separate from human activity. And this is why I do like to shed light on these things, because you would think in a critical community, in a secular community, that we'd critically engage our ideas instead of just having knee-jerk reactions. See what I'm saying? I ain't even got in my notes yet. So the big point is that contrary to popular belief, there is nothing about church other than the religious superstition that does not come from secular human activity. Nothing. So it makes me wonder, how do these type of secular people ever go to a concert? Because I'd be afraid that you'd feel like it's too much like church. You know, like, how the fuck do you go to court? Like, I'd be afraid that you'd feel like it's too much like church. You know, like, how do you go to a group therapy session? I'd be afraid that you'd feel like it's too much like church. And just as an academic, as an intellectual, that is the stupidest reason in the whole fucking world not to do something that is in your own damn best interest. And shows me that we still have a lot of reasoning flaws, even within the secular community, of course, which isn't a shocker there, right? All right, so let's jump into this. In the annals of intellectual history, few phenomena are as audacious as the Christian appropriation of sophistry. You know, a practice rooted in ancient Greece, and as we shall see, it also has antecedents in earlier civilizations. This assimilation not only underscores the adaptability of religious institutions, but also highlights their willingness to co opt secular methodologies to further their agendas. If I can make this as simple as possible, if there is no God, then everything that any human institution does came from humans. Like, it's really weird that you have to remind people of that, like, especially people who don't believe in God. You know, like at the end of the day, and I do write, I write about this in one of my other books. It won't come out until next year because it's a bigger one. But in the book called Case for Religion, I highlight this, that if there is no God, then God never gave us religion. So then what is religion other than a human intervention? And you can just pay close attention to almost all religions. I'd say at least 99% of them. The focus is on humans. In many cases, not on animals, even though there may be, the older the religions are, they have this type of synchronization. Yeah, I guess synchronization works of life, of animal life and human life. And one of my hypotheses is because they understood that we were one and the same, or had some type of understanding of that. I don't want to um, over inflate this, but we do see in many ancient cultures that they didn't see themselves as distinct from all other life on this planet, right? So the big point is that these ideas, many of the ideas that we have about religion, I think many times we fail to see that religion, especially antiquated religion, is just a failed system of humanism. It's a failed attempt at humanism. This is why the gods are personified as human. Now, it didn't start that way. We talk about totemism, we talk about animism. I've mentioned some of that in some of my other videos. And of course, none of this stuff is linear. But you have to take a longer view of history to get a better understanding of our relationships, or the evolution of our relationships with beliefs. And as I've mentioned many a times, many of the things today that we think absolutely came from, um, many of our superstitions that we think came from the older mythologies, a lot of times, and this is my hypothesis, that we've taken our current superstitions, our modern superstitions, and superimposed them on older mythologies. I'm not convinced that every culture that had mythologies treated their mythologies as supernatural or divine beings. As opposed, I'm pretty certain that there were quite a few who treated their mythologies more so as divine principles in a world where there was no separation between the sacred and the secular. And so therefore it was still all secular. And that's what I pointed out in the other videos, is that almost all of the tools that the early church used were secular. And so I want to do the same thing with sophistry. One of the things that I've shared about my experience is that, and I still tell people this to this day, but it was one of the first things I said the moment I deconverted, is that I'm not going to stop being a preacher. I don't use the title pastor anymore. I mean, I use ex-pastor, which we did have a conversation yesterday about me leaning more, not yesterday, but Sunday, about me leaning more into the atheist pastor aesthetic. And it is what it is. I don't really care about words like that. They don't make me no, never mind. But I've always said, like, I've said ever since the moment that I converted, is that I was a preacher before I was a Christian. That was a part of my personality, part of the way that I love to interact with the world. You can talk to family members about how I was when I was a child. It's just part of who I am. And so I've always known that preaching itself, it has nothing to do with religion, and does not belong to religion. So today I kind of wanted to share a little bit about what I mean when I say that. So we're talking about sophistry. And so while the term sophist is indelibly linked to ancient Greece, this is an art of persuasion and rhetorical skill that actually predates sophistry itself. As early as ancient Egypt, rhetoric was esteemed and a focus of eloquence and the strategic use of language. The Egyptians valued the balance between eloquence and wise silence, which I like that too. If you notice sometimes, that's a thing that we've definitely done with homiletics, which is this type of preaching style, is knowing how to use the purposeful pause, you know, which of course, instead of pulling our stuff from rhetoric, even though sometimes it was, most times we pulled our stuff from just, we'd create principles in the Bible that, that don't exist. Like you see Selah, like, which means pause and meditate is how we'd say it. And so like, you got to do that in your messages every now and then when you're preaching, when you're elocuting, or however you want to say this shit, electrocuting folk. Now let me stop. Excuse me. But you got to know how to use those pauses. And so a lot of this comes from rhetoric, emphasizing that knowing when not to speak was just as essential as knowing when to speak, how to let something breathe in the moment. Their rhetorical practices were deeply intertwined with social behaviors that supported typically the status quo, and skilled speech was expected to uphold rather than question societal norms. And that's likely the biggest difference between what the Christians approach, the early Christians approach to sophistry than the Greeks. Um, or actually, nope, it lines up. So we'll continue. So similarly, in Mesopotamia, particularly during the Neo-Assyrian Empire, there's evidence of rhetorical practices aimed at persuasion and influence. While specific details are still limited, the use of rhetoric in this context was likely employed in royal inscriptions and diplomatic communications to assert power and legitimacy. Now, these early traditions laid the groundwork for more formalized practice of sophistry that would emerge in Greece. So, in the 5th century before Common Era, Greece witnessed the rise of the sophists. And these were itinerant teachers who offered instructions in rhetoric, virtue, and public speaking. For those of you who don't know what that means, that's preaching. You know, figures like Protagoras and I'm gonna say Gorgias. Ooh, you so gorgeous, bourgeois, gorgias. That person exemplified the movement, emphasizing the power of persuasive speech over the pursuit of absolute truth. Their teachings were met with both acclaim and criticism as they challenged traditional notions of morality and knowledge. And just to be clear, that while we do see sophistry kind of evolve in this time to be formalized, you do see this earlier in Greek culture as well. And that's why I did want to remind everybody that even though when we talk about sophistry, we talk about the Greeks because we know what the Greeks called it. And let's just be honest, on the Western side of things, Western philosophers tend to lean into Greece and Rome. Which is not as problematic as we like to try to make it. That's typically natural for them. It's those others of us who have attachments to other cultures, in my opinion, who should be taking on the responsibility to speak for those other cultures. So I don't get mad when people say, "Oh, sophistry began with the Greeks." That's where your study of that began at. That's where your study of that was at. I'd only get mad if I mentioned that, well, in Mesopotamia and in Egypt, they also had this same form of rhetoric, same form of communication that also built crowds around people that typically supported those people. And then if you would say something like, well, no, nobody did it before Greeks, then I'd know you're one of those words that people get uncomfortable with. You know what I'm saying? Because then you're just like, no, nobody else could have done what my culture done, and that's just bullshit. Um, all human culture is incredibly connected and intertwined in a very beautiful way, which I think one of the biggest problems in history is because we don't respect other people's um, cultural responsibility to share their history. We always tell other people what their history is and what their history isn't, which is not good. Okay, so um, all right. So as Christianity began to spread through the Roman Empire, it encountered a rich tapestry of rhetorical traditions. Early Christian leaders, recognizing the efficacy of these secular methods, began to incorporate them into their teachings. The Apostle Paul, for instance, adeptly utilized rhetorical techniques to communicate Christian doctrines to diverse audiences. And one of the disingenuous things about Paul is Paul does so while criticizing the sophist. He does that I didn't come to you with persuasive speech of men's wisdom. Paul is criticizing the sophist while using their exact same methodology. And what I've really I've been trying to drive this point home to the secular community is that the modern contemporary churches that are high growth catalyst and that do things in their community like feed the poor and buy houses for folk and have gyms and have schools, those churches aren't operating off of any type of Christian methodology. They're operating off of secular methodologies. That's why they look like rock concerts now. There is nothing in the Bible that says rock the fuck on. You know what I'm saying? That shit comes from us. It's all secular. These are all of this, like, damn, like it's amazing that you have to do this much work to show people that no, if there is no God, then everything that exists, as far as every social construct, then it is a product of human invention. It is a product of human ingenuity. And therefore it has some utility if we can look beyond. Because I mean, like, how, like, we cannot be that damn dense. Like, when you see a politician speaking, are you seriously like, oh no, that's not preaching? We can't be that damn dense. But I have noticed that many people, especially in this country, we give words away because we're too lazy to research what they mean. And so we do have this type of mentality that what has always been and will always be. And in most cases, what has been has only been for the people who were too fucking lazy to figure out what it actually was. You know what I'm saying? This is one of the reasons why ever since I've started sharing content, I've been very clear. I'm actually not anti-religion. And religion doesn't bother me one shape, form, or fashion. You know why? Because I'm like a doctor. I'm not fucking anti-coughs. Why would I be anti the symptom? I'm going to be anti the root. You know what I'm saying? I'm not anti people being sick. I'm anti the root of the sickness. You know? And so the root of the sickness for me is superstition. I've been very clear about that. I've been very clear about that. There and it's only because historically there has always existed religions that don't have attachments to superstitions or supernatural claims. Now they're not as popular because who'd want a religion without a genie, right? They're not as popular, but they exist and they've always existed. And by the pure state of their existence means that the defining characteristic of religion is not a belief um, in a deity. You know what I'm saying? And that's a whole nother thing, though. Whole nother thing. And I remind people, Jediism is a religion. You know, don't know how that happened. Actually, I do know how that happened because I looked it up when it did. I was very interested. Or I don't know if it was when it did, but I looked it up when I heard about it. And this was years ago. I was still a pastor. And I was like, you got to be fucking kidding me. But that was another slippery slope. And it was just like, oh, religions can just be created. This religion could have just been created. Because the idea, and even people in the secular community sometimes hold on to these superstitious ideals, is that these things came from a god. And I'm like, no, they didn't. So, or at least I don't believe they did. So if I don't believe that any of these things came from a god, then I don't make the same distinctions that other people make. So when people use words like church or congregation, I have a really hard time separating those from words like Congress or assembly or fellowship or fraternity, because all of these words are connected. All of these words have an association. I think American exceptionalism, which combined with American ignorance, is a real threat. And at this moment, that American exceptionalism and American ignorance is like running rampant in the secular community. And this is why we have so many. Think about how many organizations that we have within the secular community and how few communities we have. I want you to really think about that shit. I want you to think about how many secular organizations we have in the secular community and how few free events we have. I want you to think about that shit. Because I'm like, you don't get brownie points for sitting on the sidelines saying, "Yeah, I don't have to go anywhere every week." That's how you're fucking losing elections. Because the Republicans, the conservative, the religious right, they meet every Sunday, they meet every Wednesday. Hell, some of the motherfuckers meet on Friday and they talk about the things that are important to them and they do the things that are important to them. And so far, by far and large, what I see a lot of in the secular community is just hobby clubs. It's hobby clubs. You do hobby clubs with your money and resources. And then you just use your mouth to complain about the shit you don't like. So all of your money and resources goes to doing shit that does nothing to help you with the shit that you're complaining about. Yeah, you're real bright bulb. And that's what's happening. So this is why I'm always going to be an advocate for community, because we need it. I'm not suggesting that any secular community stops doing what they're doing, but how much fucking longer do you hear people crying about not having support and not realize that that means we're not doing a good enough job? But that seems to be a very common thread, a very common strain in the secular community, is that we are absolutely unwilling to check ourselves. Oh yeah, no, I'm gonna call that shit out. I'm gonna call that shit out because I've had a few of you motherfuckers try to jump in my comments. No, I'm not gonna take the blame. Ain't nobody asking you to take the blame. People are asking you to be fucking responsible. Like, what the fuck? How mature are you if you're just living in the world expecting everybody else to solve your problems except for you? Grow the fuck up. Yeah, you don't want to talk to me when I'm sick because it's childish. Like, outside of a belief in God, you have absolutely no logical reason to believe that it is somebody else's obligation to solve your problems. The moment you're separated from that identity, you need to realize, at least that I did, that it's my obligation, it's my responsibility to be a part of the solution. And honestly, I don't have very much respect for people who are complaining but not doing shit. Like, the only thing you want to do is make another podcast. The only thing you want to do is talk about how bad the Christians are while not doing anything to help the people who are challenged with homelessness where you live, without doing anything to help people eat, without doing any. You want to talk about all the problems, but in your mind, it's somebody else's job to fix it. That kind of makes you fucking useless. I want you to think about that. I'm not saying you're useless. I'm saying that shit makes you useless. And you should really work on not trying to be fucking useless, especially if you think things are as bad as they are now. I don't get it. How can we claim that things are so bad while still only doing shit that's hobbyist? Bruh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean, I'm me. We're either going to build community or we're not. Either way, I know I would have tried my best. So, perhaps the most notable example of this synthesis is Augustine of Hippo. He's a former rhetorician himself. He seamlessly integrated classical rhetorical principles with Christian theology. In his work, De Doctrina Christiana, he examined how rhetoric could be employed to convey divine truths effectively. Augustine's approach not only legitimized the use of secular rhetoric within Christian discourse, but also set a precedent for future theological writings. The Christian adaptation of sophistic techniques is not merely a historical footnote, it's a testament to religion's pragmatic approach to communication. You know, by embracing and adapting secular rhetorical practices, Christianity ensured its message was both compelling and accessible. This strategic maneuvering underscores the religion's resilience and its capacity to co opt prevailing cultural norms to serve its purposes. The Christian assimilation of sophistry and rhetorical methods is a profound example of cultural appropriation, where a religious movement adeptly harnessed secular tools to propagate its message. This historical analysis reveals the complex interplay between religion and rhetoric, highlighting the lengths to which institutions will go to ensure their doctrines are both persuasive and enduring. And so, as I conclude this conversation, the big idea here is that you mean to tell me that antiquated goat herder believers were more adept to learn how to use successful tools or secular tools in order to be successful, even though they didn't agree with secular society? They were willing to adapt those tools to make sure that they could be effective. And you mean to tell me that the secular community can't adapt secular tools if the tool came in a box that you didn't recognize? Which means that you didn't have the depth enough to open up the box and say, damn, this looks like Christianity, but this is actually just humanity. Damn, this looks like church, but this is actually just community. And it's absolutely mind-boggling and heartbreaking to me because there is no sense of intelligence in that type of thinking. To say, I refuse, I'm gonna use the word to say, I refuse to congregate with others in my best interest because you use the word congregate. Or I refuse to show up at a building with other people and practice collective effort and collective economics because it might look too much like church. If that's the way you approach this, then your bulb is not as bright as you think it is, because that's not a logical approach. That's not a logical critique. If you see somebody doing community and the community is helping people and the community is helping people grow and people are getting connected and they're actually trying to do something, and you look at that and you say, oh, because that looks like church, that's not a good thing to do. There may be a lot of things that you are in that category. Intelligence is not. And I would encourage you to strive to be so. Because otherwise, you're a fucking obstacle. You're a barrier to community. And why would we be a barrier to community? All right, that's all I have for you today. I hope y'all got something out of this. I told y'all I was going to keep this short, and damn it, I did. Because honestly, if I stay on, I'm going to be coughing all over the place, and I don't want to do that. So, listen, if you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that alert notification bell. Consider joining, supporting, or connecting with this community channel or content in any way that makes sense for you. Share this video to make sure this conversation goes far and wide. And then check out our merch, man, because we have some of the dopest merch out there. It's an easy way to support the mission of building community beyond superstition while giving yourself something to sport and spreading our values. And then, of course, all of my books right now, starting yesterday, going to Friday, all of my books on Amazon are free. Go get them. And since this conversation was about community and basically why I still preach, I'm still a preacher, because it's not a religious thing. It's a rhetoric thing. It's a communication thing. It's a professor. It's the same thing. Like, and all of you get understanding. But if you're interested in supporting community, if you're passionate about supporting community, especially as passionate as I am, why not help us? You know, I used to say this a lot. Please don't just watch me. Help me. We'd be glad to have your help. If you value the work that we do, if you value community, we love to have your help. And those links are in the description. All right, that's all I have for you now, man. Until next time, keep rising, stay progressive, and if you can, stay beautiful. I'll holler at you later.